My name is Julie Eshelman. I am a military spouse, and I am the founder and CEO of Building Military Families Network, a nonprofit with the mission to empower and support our military and veteran families that are on their family building journey through resources, education, and support groups.
Yes, today's guest Julie is an advocate for family building in the military, primarily through her work with her organization, Building Military Families Network. She is also experiencing her own infertility journey. So today, Julie is going to share her story with us and share how she's helping others who serve. I'm Dan Bulger with Progyny, and this is Infertility.
My husband and I, started trying to conceive in 2016 after we had been married for a year. And at the end of that first year, we were kind of cueing into the fact that hey, there's probably something wrong here. This isn't working. But at the same time, my husband was getting orders for us to move for the Army. And so we were going to be moving from the Seattle-Tacoma area at Fort Lewis down to Scottsdale, Arizona. And when we got down to Arizona, the doctors there were like, hey, why don't you try for another year? We started over. And that was, another year. And then he deployed. And so during that deployment in 2018 and 2019, we got on a wait list for fertility clinic. And I started the diagnostic process. When he came back from deployment in early 19, he did the diagnostic process. And they couldn't find anything. So they diagnosed us with unexplained infertility, which just led to more questions and no answers. Right around the time we were getting ready to do our first IUI, we got orders to move to Chicago. And so we went ahead and did our first IUI, and it worked. We were pregnant. And unfortunately, during our cross-country move from Arizona to Illinois, we had a miscarriage. And so then we had to start the whole process over again when we got to Illinois. We had to find a new clinic. They wanted to do all their own diagnostics. They agreed with the recommendation of our first doctor to do 3 IUIs. So we proceeded with number 2 and number 3, both which ended in miscarriage. And then we proceeded with IVF. And so once everything reopened during COVID that summer, we were able to do our embryo or our egg retrieval. I ended up in the hospital after that. I just hit hurdles all, every step of the way. And then we did a transfer, and we now have a rambunctious, almost 3-year-old.
Julie and her husband suffered another setback when trying for baby number 2.
And unfortunately had a miscarriage about 2 months ago. Our fourth, this time it was our first second trimester miscarriage. And so we're still kind of on that journey. And again, with all the things, in the news lately, we're not sure what that's going to look like, because we are once again getting ready to move this summer. And so, Virginia has some laws already. And so the implications could be complicated, especially, given what's going on in the Supreme Court right now. I suffer from recurrent miscarriages, and so there's a lot to unpack in that. And so we're still on this journey.
Now that's a lot of fertility treatment. And unfortunately, they didn't qualify for coverage from TRICARE, the military coverage plan.
TRICARE only covers IVF and IUI if it is a service-connected injury or a diagnosis for the service members' infertility. And so we currently don't fall under those circumstances, and so we are paying for everything out of pocket. They do cover diagnostics and some of the ultrasounds and lab work, but the procedures themselves are not covered, or storage or testing and things like that.
Having experienced so much, Julie is working to give back through her organization, Building Military Families Network.
I really find advocacy and being able to provide, education and raise awareness on the issue to be therapeutic. The frustrations that I have felt during, this whole, 8-year journey that we've been on, and the frustrations and the pain points that we've gone through and experienced. I want to help change that for the next generation, and so that they don't have to do that. They don't have to feel unsupported, feel like there isn't anywhere to turn to ask questions in a safe space, or just the frustration that like we are one car family, or we're a one car family for so long because that's how we could afford treatments. We gave up all of these things, which made a lot of other things harder. And I don't want the next generation to have to go through that. It really spurred, I think, from our second miscarriage. It was a missed miscarriage, so we had, we'd seen the heartbeat at the fertility clinic. We got that release. We didn't have to go to the clinic anymore. We could go to a regular OB. And then when they weren't able to find the heartbeat, and it became less about that journey and making sure that like I was okay, because we ended up having to do a D&C, and I had to have this, they put you under for all of that. So we felt like we needed to open up and let people know what was going on. Like our families, like, hey, Julie has to have surgery. We were getting ready to travel to visit family in Texas and then in Pennsylvania for a family wedding. And it was like, we've got to let people know what's going on, so that so that they can be there and support us. But it was also in October during Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And so I was able to kind of open up on social media and raise awareness about that. And so that was kind of that, I think that tipping point for me was starting that, then getting involved in advocacy with Resolve and participating in that for, the last 5 years. All of that just kind of, I just kept building and building and building and doing more and more, to the point where it was like, okay, I can't wait for these military organizations to start offering things to support this community in this way, because they haven't done it in the last 8 years. I'm just going to go ahead and do it.
Julie knows firsthand that military families face unique challenges in family building.
For the average, active duty family, they're moving every 2 to 4 years. So that makes it hard for careers. There's a lot of out-of-pocket expense for moving. Military spouses are underemployed or unemployed. You don't have a support network. When you've lived in the same community for, 20 or 30 years, you've got that big network of people around you to support you. You have that close-knit group of friends. So these are all things that add on to the stress when you then discover, hey, we're facing infertility, or, if you are an LGBTQ couple that needs to do adoption or surrogacy in order to have a family. And those are all expensive things.
Building military families offers resources for those who need support.
Right now, we're offering a miscarriage and loss support group. And then we have our infertility support group. And then we have a co-branded support group for infertility with Resolve New England. And they're all going really well. The people that are, our participants in those support groups are constantly saying like, I've really needed this for a long time. Like, I'm so glad that this is here. So that's kind of one of our big areas of what we're doing and where we want to kind of grow in our organization. We want to be able to offer more types of family building option support groups.
Building military families is just getting started, but it's already making a difference.
I mean, it makes me feel really good. That's the whole point of this is, the struggles that, I went through, that my community support director, has gone through, that my board members have gone through on their journeys. It was lonely. We didn't feel like there was anywhere to turn to. And so knowing that this next generation has somewhere that they can turn to, it makes all the difference to me, is knowing that we're doing something good. I would tell, any military family, listening, you are not alone in this. we've been in your shoes. We understand how frustrating, it can be to not have insurance coverage. We know how frustrating it can be to start over at a new clinic. We know how frustrating it is to delay because of military service. Like, we understand it, we get it, and we're here to support you and help you on your journey.
You can learn more by visiting buildingmilitaryfamiliesnetwork.org. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to thank Julie for sharing her story today and for all the work she's doing for our military families all around the country. And I want to thank you for listening. If you want to follow us, you can do that at This is Infertility Podcast on Instagram, or you can follow Progyny at Progyny Inc. This is Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember that this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bulger, and this is Infertility.